Andrew Goes Fishing in Manitoba, Chapter 2, The Best Birthday Present. On the morning that Andrew turned 8, Grandpa Brown phoned to say that he and Grandma were bringing over a very special birthday present. They didn't live far away, so Andrew and his mom went outside to sit on the steps. While they waited, they tried to guess what this present would be. "Your grandpa loves nature, so I bet he got you something that has to do with the outdoors," predicted his mother. "Maybe he'll give me a pair of binoculars like he gave Penny," suggested Andrew. Penny was Andrew's cousin. "That would be great for when we go bird watching." "Oh, I know, Mom. Remember when we went to watch Grandpa fish? Do you think maybe he got me a fishing rod and reel?" questioned Andrew. "That's probably a good guess. If he did, I'm thinking he would also give you a tackle box and some fishing hooks. When I was growing up, we lived quite close to Sturgeon Creek. Grandpa used to take me and my brothers and sisters fishing there," his mother recalled, thinking back to when she was a child. "In fact, that's where your grandpa did most of his fishing when he was a boy." "Grandpa must like fishing almost as much as he likes to go bird watching. Remember when he took us to Oak Hammock Marsh to see the birds and animals that live there? And then we went inside that big building to play games?" Andrew asked. "Yes," said his mother. "That was last summer when your cousins came to visit from Ottawa. We all had fun, but especially Grandpa. It makes him really happy when he can teach his grandchildren about nature. Do you also remember how we all went camping at St. Ambroise Beach and sat around the campfire in the dark roasting marshmallows for our s'mores? Then it started pouring rain, so we went into the biggest tent and told stories and played word games. Your cousin Penny just loved the thunder and lightning." They both laughed as they thought about how Penny had peeked out the tent window and squealed every time a flash of lightning streaked across the sky. "Memories are a wonderful thing," Andrew whispered his mom. "Yes, but all that thinking back is making us forget about my birthday present. Grandpa and Grandma should be here any minute now. I really hope it's a fishing rod and everything I'll need to catch fish," her son exclaimed. Just then, Grandpa's truck turned the corner. Andrew ran to the edge of the driveway to meet them. Grandma gave him a big hug and wished him a happy birthday. Grandpa reached into the back of the truck and pulled out a shiny new fishing rod and reel and a small tackle box full of fishing lures, hooks, and sinkers. Andrew couldn't help letting out a cheer. "Mom and I were right," he whooped excitedly. "It's my very own fishing rod." Grandpa laughed. "Well, let's teach you how to cast it. This is called a spinning reel and rod. I think it's the best kind for a youngster like you to learn to fish with because it's easy to cast." "What does that mean?" Andrew asked. "Come out on the lawn and I'll show you," his grandfather responded. He tied a small sinker on Andrew's line and then showed his grandson how to cast the line out onto the grass and reel it back in. It wasn't long before Andrew was making some very good casts. Grandpa walked over to the ladies who had been watching from the driveway with interest. "I think we have a fisherman here," he announced loudly and proudly. Andrew beamed with pride when he heard his grandfather's words. Grandpa turned and spoke more quietly to his daughter and wife. "If you give children quality equipment and take them where they can catch a lot of fish, and it doesn't really matter what species, there's a good chance that they will get hooked on fishing and want to enjoy it for the rest of their lives. On the other hand," he added, "a poor quality rod and reel that has the line constantly tangled up will be frustrating, and if the fish aren't biting, the youngster will soon lose interest and may not want to go fishing again." "Grandpa Brown, Mom was telling me that when you were a kid, you did most of your fishing in Sturgeon Creek," Andrew piped in. "Yes, your mother's right," Grandpa agreed. For a minute he stood there lost in thought. Andrew waited patiently, knowing that his granddad was preparing to tell a story. Finally, Grandpa spoke. I was about your age when I first saw the creek. It was late in the spring and the water was as clear as glass. I had come with some older kids to explore. I remember walking along the bank and seeing a jackfish. At least that's what it used to be called. These days, more and more people are starting to call that species a northern pike. Anyway, that fish was so bright that it seemed to sparkle right through the water. I tried to get a closer look. Suddenly, there was a swirl in the water and the fish disappeared upstream. That magical moment has stayed in my memory all these years. Grandpa added, the reason the water was so clear in those days was because most of the water in the creek came from the springs upstream. What's a spring? Andrew asked. Grandpa answered, that's when water that is flowing underground comes to the surface and gushes out. He had more information to share. Years later, the government built rural drainage ditches that flowed into the creek. Now during spring runoff, and whenever there's a heavy rain, muddy water from the farmers' fields washes into the creek. Once the mud settles, the water becomes clear enough for a pike to see a shiny lure. Grandpa continued talking. It's the bright colors that really attract their attention. That's because pike rely more on sight than their sense of taste. It would be difficult to catch them with natural bait like the frozen minnows and worms we use at the Assiniboine River. Northern pike are the most common fish caught in the creek, but there's another species that I like to fish for, rock bass. They're little fish that hide among the rocks waiting for anything to come along that looks like food. You can catch them on small jigs. If you do catch one, you really should put it back because they're not too plentiful in the creek. You can also catch rock bass in the Winnipeg River and lakes in the Whiteshell where there are rocks. Rock bass are short and narrow with deep bodies. Then Grandpa said, talking about rocks remind me of the riffles that were built in Sturgeon Creek. He waited, knowing Andrew would ask, what's a riffle, Grandpa? A riffle is something that is found in nature. Sometimes people copy this natural design. Rocks are placed across a river or creek to raise the water on the upstream side. The riffle has a V-shaped opening that is big enough to let water and fish pass through. This allows the fish to get to all parts of the creek. Riffles also create habitat for bugs and small animals that fish eat. Water bubbles over the riffles, and this helps to take oxygen from the air and add it to the water, explained Grandpa. Oh, I almost forgot. There's another thing you should know about northern pike. They have sharp teeth that can bite right through fishing line. So you'll need to attach a wire leader to the end of your line. Let's open your tackle box and I'll show you what one looks like. Leaders have snaps at the end so you can change your lures without having to retie the line each time. You'll know when you get a bite because pike like to grab their prey by the head. It's easier to swallow that way. Wow, you sure know a lot, said wide-eyed Andrew. Grandpa smiled and said, I've also given you some lures. They're called artificial bait because they often look like real fish with hooks attached to them. There are 4 different kinds of lures. Grandpa held one up. This one is called a plug. It wiggles through the water with a side-to-side motion just like a real fish. Grandpa picked up another lure. This is a spoon. It's made out of metal and can be round or long or shaped like a spoon. Some people call this kind of lure a wobbler because it wobbles back and forth through the water rather than side to side like a real fish. Grandpa carefully picked 2 more lures from Andrew's tackle box. Here we have a spinner. It's called that because it has a blade on it that spins around. That makes the shiny color flash on the spinner moves through the water, as the spinner moves through the water. The last lure is called a jig. Usually it's just a hook with a lead head on it and you attach your worm or frozen minnow. Some jigs come with a curly, soft plastic tail on them. Grandpa had one last thing to say. Here are 2 tools you'll also need. A pair of pliers so that you can catch the fish so that when you catch a fish, you can remove the hook from its mouth, and a tape measure in case you catch a big one and want to see whether it qualifies for a Master Angler Award. Thanks for all the awesome fishing stuff, Grandpa said, Andrew, showing his appreciation. You're very welcome, son. It's really called fishing tackle, Grandpa said with a smile. I know I've given you a lot of information today, but you'll learn it as you use it. With a little practice, you'll be an excellent fisherman. Actually, I should call you an angler or a fisher. Those are better names for people who fish. Oh, that reminds me of something else. I put a copy of this year's Angler's Guide in the bottom of your tackle box. It's a good idea to keep it there in case you need to check the limit for a particular species of fish or look up a fishing regulation. A regulation is just another name for a rule or law. Now that Andrew knew something about the equipment that Grandpa had given him, the burning question for Andrew was, when can I go on my first fishing trip? His mother spoke up. Well, not today. You have a birthday party this afternoon. Grandpa pretended to be thinking. Then he finally said, if it's all right with your parents, how about we go tomorrow? Andrew looked eagerly at his mom. The look on his face said, please, I'll be very good. His mother smiled and nodded. They didn't have any plans for the next day. And how could she possibly say no to such a great kid? Yes, cheered Andrew. The birthday party was a lot of fun. Andrew received some amazing gifts, but he already had his favorite one.